Get your popcorn and fidget toys ready, people. I think we're going to be in for a long one here.
Take that, mental illness. Hello, my friends, and welcome to Youth Potential, a place where we talk about all sorts of things related to mental health. Whether you feel good or whether you feel meh, this place is for you. Also, I've got an Instagram account. Please go and check that out.
Hello, my friend Scott here, representing Youth Potential. Today I'm talking about the reality of overdosing. Now, as you know, overdosing can be intentional and it can be unintentional. Usually here at Youth Potential I'm talking about the suicidal intentional overdoses. But today I'm going to be sharing a few stories with you which cover some unintentional and some intentional overdoses. The reason I want to share these with you, it's mostly down to the fact that not a lot of people think about what can happen at the other end of an overdose when one takes one, especially if one is not successful in ending their life. And this is always difficult to talk about. It's not easy to talk about on a regular basis. And it's been a while since I've spoken about suicide and taking an overdose. A lot of the time in the past, I've had people leave really smart-ass comments like, oh, well, if I can't kill myself through an overdose, I'm going to do something else then. If you want to leave a comment like that, that's up to you. I will read it and I will not respond to it. I will kind of just mentally disregard it. And that's not because, you know, I'm against freedom of speech or anything like that. It's just, I have to set boundaries for myself, okay? So any comments like that, I won't be replying to. Anyway, let's just get on with the video and let me share these stories. So the first one is about the last time I took an overdose. The last time I took an overdose, I've just worked out to be the back end of 2019. It was just coming up to Christmas and I was really in a bad place. I'd already taken 2 sort of smaller overdoses leading up to that around sort of October time. And I was really psychotic. I was hearing voices a hell of a lot and they were telling me to do things to myself. And that sounds crazy, but that's just that's what was going on in my consciousness. I took this overdose and I remember thinking, I'm fucking fed up of life. I've had enough, just going around in circles over and over and over again. Took this overdose and I thought this is going to be it. Next thing I know, I woke up in hospital in A&E. Same shit again, hooked up via a drip, you know, having all the ECG monitors over me. It's a horrible feeling waking up and just thinking, for fuck's sake, I've done it again. I failed again. Yeah, disappointment was what I was filled with. Obviously now, I look back and I think I'm glad I woke up, but at the time I was heavily disappointed. After making the physical recovery and having chats with the psychiatric team, I ended up in the psych ward again, this time for about somewhere between 5 and 7 days. And I'm glad I went down that path that time because it really gave me a chance to just think, hang on a minute. Okay, I'm putting myself through this again. I'm putting my family through this again. You know, I'm putting my kids through this again. I need to buck my ideas up. I know that's easier said than done, and at the time, it wasn't that easy to just say that. I had to back that up with action over time. But yeah, I turned things around. I'm not saying I'm fully recovered and happy 24/7, but I haven't been like actively suicidal for nearly 4 years, and I'm glad. I'm glad I've got to that stage. Yeah. I'm hoping that experience kind of put me off for life, because I don't want to have to go through that again. It's fucking shit. Excuse my language. Why am I saying excuse my language? I don't normally say that. Anyway, so let's move on to story number 2. Actually, sorry, just for a bit of context, that last that first story I just told you, I had to declare myself as homeless when I came out of the hospital because I wasn't able to go back and live with my mum because of my siblings being young, and it wasn't fair on them being around that kind of behaviour. Yeah, I was struggling with my mental health, but for the well-being of my siblings, I had to move out. And luckily my nan let me move in with her. So anyway, yeah, back to story number 2. And this was in early 2018. It's been about a couple of months since the mother of my children and I had split up. I really took that to heart, that whole period. Like, you know, it was a massive change for me. You know, I was no longer living with my children. My mental health had been bad. I relapsed to self-harm for like the first time in like 7 years. I was an absolute mess. And I took this overdose, the first one I'd taken for about 10 years, I think. I worked it out. No, about 9 years. I remember taking it and waking up the next morning at about, I think it was about 11 o'clock. I remember waking up, I could barely breathe. I was still in my own bed. And I remember my nan, because I was living with my nan again at this point, my nan came in. She tried waking me up, and I remember just being barely conscious, and I was really struggling to breathe. My throat was it was like almost like my tongue had gone to the back of my throat. It was horrible. And then I remember passing out and then waking up again to find my mum shaking me. I kind of passed out again. And then I come to, and there's paramedics in my room, and they're trying to ask me questions. They're asking me, you know, what have you taken? How much have you taken? You know, what led you to this? Can you... And then they do the thing where it's like holding my arm up, seeing if I'm responding. I could barely function. I was barely conscious of what was going on. I just remember 2 paramedics talking to me and trying to sit me up, and I just kept on falling back down. Yeah. I just kept on going in and out of consciousness. It was weird. It was like being really, really, really drunk and just barely being able to make out what's going on around you. And then the next thing is the paramedics trying to get me to walk down the path to the ambulance from like my room. And I can't begin to tell you how difficult that was. Not because I was barely conscious, but through the overdose, my mental pathway, if you like, to my legs, you know, like the part of the brain that moves my legs and other parts of my body, that was really inhibited. I was trying to think about moving my arms and legs, and as much as I thought about it, I couldn't do the movements as quickly as I could think about them like I normally would. Yeah, I remember stumbling down to the ambulance, just trying to stay awake, trying to stay conscious. So I had paramedics holding me up under each arm. And my God, when I sat down in the ambulance, I felt a sigh of relief, and I just passed out again. And just kept on going in and out of consciousness till I got to the hospital. I remember sitting down in A&E, passing out again, waking up, desperate for the toilet. Went to the toilet, like for a number 1, and came back, passed out again. And I just remember being A&E for ages, passing in and out of consciousness. At one point, I think I passed out long enough to wet myself a little bit. It's not nice. Waking up and your your crotch area is a bit damp. Not nice at all. And the whole time, I was just so confused. I had like no idea where I was. I mean, I knew I was in hospital, but it didn't feel like I was there. It felt like a surreal dream, you know, when you feel like the dream's real. It kind of felt like that sensation. And then, yeah, after being there for what, 12 hours, I think it was, 12, maybe more, I was carted off to the psych ward again. Yeah. It's just, it's a horrible feeling, honestly, like physically, emotionally. Yeah. It really takes it out of you. So, story number three, should I say. Story number 3, I was at work, and this was when I did my old job. This is when I was working in a hotel, worked in a kitchen. It was coming to the end of the shift. We just cleaned up and ready to go home when one of my colleagues runs into the kitchen, says, someone's passed out in the corridor, they're not responding, we don't know what's happened, can you please come and help? So I ran because I had a feeling, you know, someone's either drunk or potentially taken an overdose, because people trying to commit suicide in hotels is sadly not uncommon enough. So yeah, ran down the corridor, and it's quite a long corridor, probably about 50 metres in length maybe. There's plenty of rooms. And I remember getting there, and there was this gentleman. He was lying on the floor. He was only wearing his underwear. He was half lying in his room in the doorway, and then half in the corridor. And he was down there. There was a little pool of sick next to his face where he was laying. And there was other people staying at the hotel. They were kind of sticking their heads out of their rooms because, you know, people are nosy, of course, and concerned. I looked down and I had a feeling that this guy had probably taken overdose. So I shouted to my colleagues, ring the ambulance. I quickly stuck my head in, went in his room, and I'd see he'd taken like some paracetamols and sort of flu tablets. I could see roughly how many he took just based upon the empty packaging. And from my own personal experience, I knew that that shouldn't be fatal. Obviously, you don't take that risk, so you still call the ambulance. And it was really surreal, because this was the first time that someone had taken an overdose, and I was on the other side of it. I was in a position where I was trying to help someone, like make sure that they didn't get into any further harm. So the paramedics came, they whisked him off. He was conscious. About 20 minutes into the paramedics being in there, he was trying to talk. The paramedics were trying to ask him questions, like to try and get him to, you know, use his consciousness. And he couldn't speak properly. He was kind of slurred. He was kind of like half lying on the floor, just dribbling a little bit. And what he was saying, he couldn't quite make it out. My colleagues and I, we worked out where his vehicle was, and we saw it in the car park. And by this point, he'd been taken off to hospital. So we were just trying to see if he had any belongings outside of his room, you know, just so that we could look after it until he came back for them. We saw his car. It was a massive, like, 4x4, and it was filled with his possessions. And at this point, we kind of worked out that his partner, his wife had probably left him. They'd split up, and he wasn't taking it too well. That's really sad, but, you know, the paramedics assured me that he was going to be okay, physically at least. Yeah. I'm not going to lie, this is exhausting, sharing this much about overdosing. So the fourth and final story, this one actually happened very, very recently. It happened last week, and it's not me taking an overdose. This was actually an accidental overdose. This happened at the place I work, you could say, or in a property in which the place that I work at services, someone had accidentally overdosed on heroin. I just remember being called to the scene, and it was very near to our main, like one of our offices. Went in there, and a gentleman had OD'd. He was not breathing, he was not responding, his lips and face started to go blue. It was scary. It was really, really scary, because this is the first time I'd seen someone overdose and get to that stage of being completely unresponsive. Like I said, in the last story, the only other time I've witnessed someone in front of me overdosing, you know, that person had not taken much and they were okay. But this was scary. It wasn't just me at the scene on my own. There was a few other colleagues of mine. Naloxone had to be administered to the person who'd overdosed on heroin, which is something that's meant to help the individual kind of just snap out of it. It's meant to be like an anti-opioid substance. And usually when someone overdoses and you give them naloxone, they snap out of it instantly. This time, with 2 of these injections, this person started to breathe again. I just remember him laying there on his bed. He started breathing after a little while after the second shot. And it was concerning, because we all knew that by this stage, this person should have been sitting upright, fully conscious, aware of what's going on. But with two administered naloxones, it just about started to help him breathe. And his breathing was very heavy, it was very laboured. And whilst on the phone to the emergency services, I was told, you know, put him in a recovery position. I started to do that because I had gloves on at the time. And just as I was about to finish putting him into position, his eyes opened and he looked at me, and it kind of made me jump a little. He looked at me and I was like, "You all right, mate? You all right? It's okay, we're here." He got up and he was so out of it. He looked like he'd just woken up in a completely different dimension. The paramedics turned up at this point and he started to throw up. He was being sick. And he tried telling us that he'd had too much to drink, and we were just like, no, that's not what happened. And you know that's not what happened. But fortunately, he was okay. He was all right after that. So, yeah, there's a crazy, dark world out there. And there are so many reasons as to why people overdose, you know, whether it's intentional or accidental. But it can affect you so much, physically, emotionally, mentally. And its effects can last a long time. Yeah. I really don't recommend it to anyone. Thank you for watching this video, guys. It was probably a bit of a slog to get through. You know, it was a long video, but I hadn't done anything for a while, and to be completely honest, I've been struggling again with my confidence about getting out on camera again. So I just haven't made any content. But today, I was feeling good enough, strong enough to share these experiences. Please feel free to vent in the comments section about your own experiences. As I say, I read all my comments. I don't respond to them all, but I do read them all. Everybody, take care.